When pub landlords across Britain start treating politicians like they're banned from a nightclub for bad behavior, you know something has gone spectacularly wrong with government policy. Over 200 pub owners have essentially told Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, and every single Labour MP to sling their hook and find somewhere else to drink. And honestly, the level of coordinated fury required to make hundreds of business owners collectively refuse service to an entire political party is the kind of British rebellion that deserves its own folk song. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where today we're unpacking the Taxed Out campaign, a movement that's turned pub landlords into political activists and made Labour MPs about as welcome in British boozers as a vegan at a barbecue. Because nothing screams "we've lost the room" quite like the hospitality industry organizing a nationwide boycott of your entire parliamentary party. So let's talk about what's actually driven pub owners to this point, because banning MPs isn't exactly a casual decision. These are people who make their living by welcoming everyone through the door, by creating inclusive spaces where communities gather. The fact that they're now specifically excluding politicians tells you everything about how desperate and angry they've become. This isn't a publicity stunt. This is a genuine cry for help dressed up as protest. The trigger for all this fury is Rachel Reeves' budget, which has basically declared open season on small pubs. Nearly 5,000 small pubs that previously didn't pay business rates are about to get walloped with huge bills for the first time. 5,000! That's not a minor policy tweak affecting a handful of businesses. That's an entire sector of the industry suddenly facing costs they've never had to budget for before. Imagine running your pub for years, managing your finances carefully, and then the government rocks up and says, "Surprise, here's a massive new bill you weren't expecting." But wait, it gets worse, because of course it does. The temporary rates relief that pubs currently benefit from is being replaced with a less favorable system. So not only are thousands of pubs facing new bills, but the ones already paying are seeing their costs increase dramatically. The Sun reports that a standard British pub's annual business rates bill could jump by £6,000. $6,000! And in certain cases, we're talking increases in the tens of thousands of pounds. That's not a financial adjustment, that's a financial nuclear bomb. The boss of a major pub chain warned this could be a tipping point that changes the shape of the industry forever. And that's not hyperbole, that's reality. When your costs suddenly spike by thousands or tens of thousands of pounds, especially when margins are already razor thin, businesses close, jobs disappear, communities lose their local. The entire landscape of British pub culture starts to fundamentally change, and not in a good way. James Fowler, the pub owner who came up with the idea to ban Labour politicians, absolutely nailed the frustration when he said, "You just feel like you're being ignored all the time." This ban is a direct and clear message that they're not happy with Labour MPs and the hidden taxes being thrown at them. Fowler owns the Larder House pub in Bournemouth, and he's basically become the accidental leader of a hospitality revolution. Sometimes the most effective protests come from ordinary people who've simply had enough. What makes the situation even more infuriating for pub owners is that they've tried the conventional routes. They've had multiple meetings with ministers, they've sent letters, they've made their case through proper channels. And according to Andy Lennox, who owns 6 venues in Dorset, Labour just aren't listening. So now more extreme measures are needed. When dialogue fails, when the people in power refuse to hear you, you escalate. And for pub owners who can't afford to strike or march on London, refusing service to the people causing their problems is the most powerful tool they have. Labour's budget didn't just hit pubs with increased business rates, it also brought massive increases in employer national insurance contributions and wages. Now, higher wages for workers is generally a good thing. Nobody's arguing against people earning a living wage. But when you layer wage increases on top of national insurance hikes, on top of business rates explosions, you create a perfect storm of financial pressure that businesses simply cannot absorb. Andy Lennox put it perfectly when he said there's nowhere else to cut. You can only trim costs so much before you start cutting into the bone. The really galling thing for these pub owners is that Labor keeps claiming they're helping hospitality. The government stands up and says, "Look at all this support we're providing," while actual hospitality businesses are drowning in new costs and screaming that they're being crushed. It's like someone standing on your foot while insisting they're giving you a massage. The disconnect between what Labor says and what pub owners experience is so vast you could drive a bus through it. Andy Lennox spelled out the impossible position hospitality businesses are in. They cannot afford to close. They cannot afford to strike. They cannot afford to down tools and march on London. So they're doing the one thing that gets MPs' attention. They're stopping serving them until politicians start serving the businesses that actually need help. It's a brilliant piece of political judo, using the very nature of hospitality against politicians who've taken these businesses for granted. Nick McKenzie, who oversees 2,600 pubs, wrote an article pointing out that pubs have survived wars, recessions, and even a global pandemic. Think about that for a second. Pubs made it through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple economic crashes, and COVID. And what might finish them off is tax policy from a government that claims to support them. That's not just ironic, that's tragic. Andy Lennox, founder of the Taxed Out campaign, made a passionate call for unity, saying every single person in hospitality should join the campaign and bar every Labour MP. He acknowledged that most won't because it's scary and not an easy thing to do. And he's right, there's genuine risk in taking a political stand as a business owner. You might alienate customers who support Labor. You might face backlash. You might worry about retaliation or being targeted for inspections or regulatory pressure. It takes courage to publicly refuse service to sitting MPs. But Andy was also clear that this campaign isn't about local MPs specifically. It's about the government as a whole. This isn't a vengeful diarrhea against individual politicians. It's protest against systemic policy failure. The MPs getting banned are symbols of a government that's abandoned hospitality businesses despite claiming the opposite. They're the public face of policies that are threatening livelihoods and communities. The reason the Taxed Out campaign exists at all is because traditional protest methods aren't available to these business owners. They can't close and strike because they can't afford to lose the revenue. They can't organize a day of action in London because they need to be running their businesses. They've already done all the proper stuff, sent letters, spoken with their MPs, followed every conventional avenue for expressing concern, and it got them precisely nowhere. So now they're left with unconventional protest, with making politicians personally feel the consequences of their policy decisions. A report from UK Hospitality revealed the brutal numbers behind all this anger. Small venues like pubs, bars, and cafes will see business rates rise by £318 million over the next 3 years. That's not distributed evenly either. Some businesses will be hit far harder than others. £318 million sucked out of small businesses that operate on tiny margins and provide essential community services. That money could have been invested in improvements, in hiring more staff, in keeping prices affordable for customers. Instead, it's going to the government while Labour claims they're supporting hospitality. The Conservatives, who spent 14 years creating plenty of their own problems for businesses, have called this a budget bombshell and one of the most punishing sets of tax rises high streets have faced in years. And you know what? Even accounting for Conservative hypocrisy and political opportunity, they're not wrong about this. The scale of these tax increases is genuinely unprecedented in recent memory. Just because the Conservatives are saying it doesn't make it untrue. What we're witnessing is a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between government and the hospitality sector. Labour came into power promising to support businesses, to help high streets thrive, to be on the side of working people and entrepreneurs trying to make a living. But their actual policies have done the opposite. They've loaded costs on businesses while claiming to help them. They've ignored industry warnings and feedback. And they've convinced themselves that their political messaging is more important than economic reality. The human cost of all this gets lost in the statistics sometimes. Behind every pub facing increased rates is a landlord who's probably stressed about whether they can keep their business afloat. There are staff members worried about their jobs, suppliers who depend on these pubs buying from them, communities that rely on these spaces for social connection. When a pub closes, especially in rural areas or small towns, it often leaves a hole in the community that nothing else fills. The local loses its gathering place. Elderly residents lose a space to socialize. Sports teams lose their home base. The entire landscape of British pub culture starts to fundamentally change, and not in a good way. The particularly cruel irony of this whole situation is that Labour's traditional base includes working-class people, hospitality workers, small business owners trying to make ends meet. These are exactly the people Labour is supposed to represent and protect. But the policies coming out of this Labour government are actively hurting those very same people. It's political malpractice disguised as fiscal responsibility. The Taxed Out campaign is spreading because pub owners across the country recognize themselves in the stories being shared. They see their own struggles reflected in the businesses joining the protest. They understand the impossible financial pressure, the feeling of being ignored by politicians, the frustration of doing everything right and still drowning in costs. So more venues keep signing up, more MPs getting banned, and the movement gains momentum because it's addressing a real and widespread problem.